Hello, fans and friends. Darn it, I forgot my water. Can't do a video without water. Well, whatever. I don't want to stop it and go get water. How's it going, everybody? It's good to see you. I just felt like chatting, so here I am. So let's chat. I posted in the description here. I posted a link to where you can download the latest episode of Dead Air, my radio show, my weekly radio show on the University of Manitoba. I'm going to try to do this a little more often. Just post the link in the crotch box, as Spiro calls it. I think these links only last a week or two. I'm not sure how long. It's through a free website called WeTransfer that I've used for years now, ever since I've kind of had the show. Whenever I do pre-records in the past, and then obviously for this last year, I've been doing it, most often every week. This is a repeat of an episode from April of last year. It's kind of a mixtape. Every once in a while, when I don't want to talk too much throughout the show, I just do kind of a mixtape and throw in a bunch of stuff. This one's got like movie trailers and all sorts of music. So if you want to download it, the link is there. I also, tonight, we had a little bit of a dance party here at the house. We were playing a bunch of music, and as what often happens, as I start digging through videos that I have bookmarked on my YouTube page, I end up, we always end up ending off the night listening to some Italian music, and it's more often than not one of my all-time favorite singers, Mina Mazzini. So one of my absolutely favorite songs of hers, and I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce it. I put the link to that song in the description as well. I'll throw it in here too. Let me see. How can I do that? I do this. And let's see if that works. Yeah, there it goes. Okay. So hopefully that's a link that you can click on there. Mina Mazzini is just, she's phenomenal. She's phenomenal. She's still around. She's still recording stuff. I like the 60s and 70s Mina, but specifically the 60s stuff is really, really incredible. The other thing that I love about this one clip that I posted the link to is the studio that a lot of these performances. So over the years, a lot of this stuff has been taken off of YouTube. There was a couple of channels, and boy, I wish I could remember the names of the channels, that posted a boatload of all sorts of Italian singers from this, what looked like this same studio space. What the name of the studio is, I couldn't tell you. I'm not that absorbed in that particular part of music history that I know what the spaces would have been. But it's just this television studio, and the setup for it is gorgeous. You can see a band in the background. One of her other songs, Sei Telefonando, was written by Ennio Morricone, who did, spaghetti westerns. Ennio did a lot of music for 60s singers at the time too, and his Sei Telefonando that she sings was an enormous hit. There used to be a clip with her performing that live, loose quotes, lip syncing and things, but with the band in the background. Actually, I shouldn't say that. Some of the older videos, it's sometimes hard to tell if they're lip syncing or if they're singing in real time, if they're really singing while they're there, because it sort of blurs. Sometimes it looks like it's real, and sometimes it looks completely like it's just pre-recorded. Anyway, my love for Mina Mazzini knows no bounds. Check her out. She's just an incredible woman. I had an idea for a little while of, I would love to make a movie set in that time period, or write a story set in that time period and recreate some of that stuff and make it kind of like a mystery and a love story and whatever, and just have it but set in that 60s world. So you could have an opportunity to have these people perform some of these songs within the movie. I thought would be a great idea. So anyway, that's enough of me rambling on about my love for Mina Mazzini. One thing that I've wanted to talk about for a while, there was a request, or there was a couple of requests for quite a while, to look at some 8-Ball by Dan Clowes. So believe it or not, I actually remembered to pull the books out. over the years, I've still got a few of them. I don't have the whole series. Over the years, things get lost, things get traded away, things get loaned out to people and not returned when I was a teenager, that sort of thing. So I had more of these. I had more. I had some really early Pete Bag work that I really, I just kick myself for not having anymore. There was a lot of this kind of 90s indie creator stuff that I had that is long gone, and I really just don't know where the hell it went to. I did manage to retain some stuff. Obviously, I've talked about it before. But one of the things that I did manage to keep was my copy that I bought off the shelf of 8-Ball issue number 1. I've got 2 and 3 here as well, and then it kind of gets scattered from that point. 2, 3, and 4, it looks like. Yeah, so 1 to 4 is what I have. And then I think the later ones are ones that I bought more recently. Oh, Mr. Foam Panels and Columns. How you doing, man? Like I said, this has been a request for years. There's been a couple of people, and I apologize if I'm forgetting exactly who had talked about this and wanted to kind of see these. But I figured we'd just spend a minute talking about this before we talk about some of the new stuff that I've read. The other reason is this came up just in the last conversation we had. We were talking about Twin Peaks, and someone in the chat had asked if there was any comics that they could read if they were a fan of Twin Peaks. And the first thing that came up, I believe it was you, Architectural, that mentioned the same thing, possibly, if I'm remembering the chat correctly, that Like a Velvet Glove Cast in Iron, I would say, would be that kind of classic story. And I mean, what can I tell you about this book? Like, I was steeped in indie. So what are we looking at here? We're looking at 1989. So I was, 16 years old. I was steeped in independent comics, and I'd known Dan Clowes. My brother, I think I've told this story before. I was a big Mad Magazine fan. My brother was a big Cracked Magazine fan, The Ugly Family. So I had exposure to Dan Clowes in there. I had some Lloyd Llewellyn. And so I knew his work. So when I saw this, again, it was one of those things that were just a no-brainer. But I didn't really expect, especially this first story. And both my brother and myself, we were addicted to this, which is why I have all of those right out of the gate, those first 4 there. At the time, I didn't know anything about a pull list. I would just try to remember and get to the comic shop. I didn't really even know how often these books came out. I didn't know anything about Wednesdays. We just went, when we went downtown, we would just kind of we'd do the circuit. It would be the comic shop. There was a lot of music. There was this place, Records on Wheels downtown. And I went to Records on Wheels a ton because I was heavy into music. So we didn't always go to the comic shop, but when we did, I would try to remember to pick up stuff that I enjoyed in the past. But this Velvet Glove was just such an unusual story. Such an unusual story. It completely just stood out, head and shoulders above anything else that I was reading at the time. And then, of course, I would say that kind of a very, very in the same wheelhouse, maybe not as like unusual in a different way, would be Jim Woodring's work. So his magazine, Jim, which I've talked about as well too and shown those off. Those had a huge influence on my life as well. Here we get a little kind of chick tract called The Devil Doll or Devil Doll. Really just a great time period for these guys. So, I mean, between Jim Woodring, Dan Clowes, and Pete Bag, I was in heaven and I was reading all of that stuff. My first exposure to Clowes, let me just do this. First exposure to Clowes was a TV show, Anti-Gravity Room, a Canadian classic, my friend. Anti-Gravity Room was an absolute staple. That and what was the... I wish DaCosta was here. Blanking on the name of the host of the show was Rick Green. Prisoners of Gravity is the show that I'm thinking. I don't know if you know that one, Architectural Foam Panels. I don't know if there's any Prisoners of Gravity on YouTube, but Prisoners of Gravity along with Anti-Gravity Room, those were fantastic shows. Prisoners of Gravity did a lot more interviews, and they would talk to science fiction writers as well too. So it wasn't just comic book people. There was usually a theme for the show that they would kind of lump everything together, but it's like they just did enormous interviews with a whole bunch of people and then eventually strung that into a season of television. Beautiful. Yeah, there you go. Great interviews on Prisoners of Gravity. Absolutely. A lot of really good people on those shows there. So that's the first issue. And one of the things that happened in the back here, what is the most important invention of the 20th century? So apparently a bunch of interviews with people in an old folks home and with random questions and then their responses that Klaus just drew for the back cover. And I think that happened on a couple of the books. We'll find out in a moment. So, I mean, there you go. That's a Comic Crack original right there. Pedigree, I guess, is the Comic Crack pedigree. It's been well loved, and this was one that definitely got passed around from the very few friends who were interested in reading comics, which there wasn't a ton of them. And then we'll have a flip through, maybe we'll have a flip through this second one, and then we'll just kind of look at the covers of the other ones, and then we'll kind of move on. So again, bought off the shelves, number 2. And yeah, there you go. So on the back, the same thing again. What do you think George Washington's voice sounded like? Just the kayfabe guys talked about Klaus when they were looking through the collected 8-ball, which is a book that I would love to get my hands on. That hardcover collection I think would be great, as would the hardcover Hate and the hardcover Neat Stuff. But when they were, it's well worth checking out if you haven't seen the video. Just a real interesting cat, you know, like with a beautiful art style. I don't need to sell Klaus to people. I mean, everybody, if you're watching my channel, I'm sure that you're more than familiar with Klaus' work and love it just like I do. But yeah, this Velvet Glove just had quite a strangeness to it. Made more so strange just by his art and the facial features of people and their reactions to things and kind of the static panels. Really great. So there you go. There's some 8-ball that I promised a couple of people for about a year now. And if you're still watching the channel, or if you got fed up because I didn't listen to you and you've left, oh well, you missed out. And then we got issue number 3 here. And issue number 4. And then missing a couple, and then we jump to issue number 7. Even the covers are great on this. And then numero 8. And 12. This is a much more recent pickup. And finally, number 15. So like I said, I don't have the whole series. And it's one of those things, it's another one of those books that just don't come up. People who have the floppies aren't getting rid of them. And the very, very few times that I see them, they go for a couple of bucks. So that was 8-ball. One of the things I read, I wanted to talk about a couple of the things I read. We'll start with this one. This is book 1 in Francois Scoyton and Luc Scoyton's Hollow Ground series. So Karapachis. Yes. Okay, good. We agree. So a lot of short stories in this one. I didn't like this one as much as I liked Zara. That said, though, this final story about this guy whose sole purpose in his town is to be the fog cutter. They have this atmospheric problem where overnight the fog will roll into town, and overnight it will solidify. around buildings and sometimes around people, and his job is to cut through that fog to release people who have been trapped, who maybe didn't close their windows. He's fallen in love. He goes through this routine. He's building a giant sculpture, and he spies on this woman just to see her get ready for her day, and he's just madly in love with her. So it just kind of follows it through there. He wants to work on his sculptures, and he wants to try to make some time with this lady, let's just say. But this blasted fog just keeps rolling in and solidifying people, so he's got to abandon his work. And it's a great story. It's really, really great. It's a neat idea. And I think I mentioned it last time we were talking about Scoyton. His ability to create these worlds, these unusual worlds with their own very unique rules that still just look like our world to some degree, is really fascinating. The one thing that we do get in here is there's talk intermediately in between the stories of the flitters, which is the flying creatures that we've seen in the book Zara, the second half of Zara. So we get kind of them. One of the most important is unquestionably the materializing of flitters in dozens, even hundreds of universes as a consequence of their in-flight copulation. So we kind of get a little look into their habits and what they do. So there are themes that run through these books for sure. We'll see if they appear in the final book, which unfortunately I'm probably going to have to order online. I'm not having any luck locally here, so I'm going to hold out a little longer, though, before I do. So overall, a good book. It just didn't grasp me. It just didn't catch me as much as Zara did. This first story is neat, too. Just the transition of the art in this first story, looking kind of black and white, and then eventually we start to realize that, where are we here? Start to realize that there's human flesh and blood human beings beneath this kind of armor as they start undressing so they can do it the old-fashioned way as opposed to through these suits with hoses connecting, etc. So yeah, really great. Not much. I'm not going to say anything else about it. Just other than I love his storytelling, and it's not like that was a bad book by any stretch. It just wasn't my favorite so far out of the two. Our friend Jared Osborne was good enough to do a video, which I was super excited about, very, very excited about, of Night Streets. So all the talk back and forth because he had seen that I was getting it and he couldn't believe that somebody else was interested in it. So I guess it encouraged him to reread his 5 issues. And he said he read them all in one night. And then he did a video on them, and it was fantastic. I loved seeing that video, and I loved everything that he said about this book in that video. I encourage you, if you're not subscribed to Jared Osborne, go and check him out. I love, even on Wednesdays, I love seeing his videos that he posts on what books he picked up that week. I think this week he said he picked up 12 books. So definitely go and check him out. So I finished the 5 issues of Night Streets. I had, mycomicshop.com has some of the graphic novels. So I have those bookmarked. Unfortunately, I just don't have the money right now in PayPal to kind of spring on an order from my comic shop. I've got a bunch listed there. So I finished it, and overall, I like I was saying before, I really dug it. I mean, there's moments that are difficult. The art really, everything really seems to come into sync at around issue 3. This issue, rather, issue 3, the one that I'm holding in my hands right now. Things kind of start to gel a little more. It feels like he finds his footing as an artist. It feels like the writing isn't as dense, even though it's still dense. We're dealing with a lot of characters here. We're dealing with a big story. We're dealing with basically crime gangs versus each other. We're dealing with a superhero that we don't get to see too often. We're dealing with reporters. We're dealing with all sorts of things, right? It's enjoyable. And like I said, the writing to me is natural in kind of like a 90s courtroom or cop drama kind of way. It has that reality and that kind of naturalness to it, but it's still one step away from how we might talk in person back and forth. It has that kind of TV writing thing going on for it. So another one of the many things that I love about these indie comics and these 80s comics and even 90s and small press stuff is I absolutely love, first of all, reading the editorials. And these ones are always really good. Yeah, so I can't remember if it was in this one. He's talking about, he spends a lot of time talking about just if you're, it depends on who you're listening to. You might hear from one person that black and white comics have reached their peak and it's about to bust and there's just an overabundance of black and white books. Or if you listen to another camp, they'll say that black and white comics aren't real comics, or you'll hear people just praising everything about them, saying that this is the best form and it's going to last forever and blah, blah, blah. And then literally 2 issues later, our editor, Randy Zimmerman, is gone. He's left and got another job as things start to kind of implode, as we know that they did, right? So I love reading the editorials. They had a lot of really good insight into what they wanted to do as a company, their plans for the future. Like we've talked about before, this ICPA, Independent Comic Publishers Association, getting together with some more independent comic book publishers and kind of forming a coalition to help promote each other's work and get themselves distributed through Diamond and stuff. So it's always a really good insight. I haven't read one quite like this though, where you literally see the climb, and then literally it just falls apart, because issue 5 is the last one. They promised a 6 and a 7, and they even talk about going to monthly to continue on, but none of that ever happens because everything just dies and everything dies off. So I love reading the editorials, and I also love reading the letters, and I'm hoping that this shows up here. So in this one, we get a letter from Greg McBride from here in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. So I love that stuff. So this one came out in 1987. This letter was written in 1986. The 1986 in Winnipeg, there was an infamously enormous snowstorm. So he talks about it. It's 6 a.m. I've only had 2.5 hours of sleep since yesterday. We are in the middle of our worst storm in 20 years, over 35 centimeters of snow. I'm at work on overtime. I can't leave and nobody else can get here. We only have a skeleton crew and I get to hold the fort in case anything comes up. I've just finished reading Night Streets #2. I enjoyed it. And then he talks about the issue, but it's incredible. I mean, I remember that blizzard. I remember it. And I was looking on YouTube. There's a video talking about it where it kind of has all this older footage from back then. Literally cars buried in snow. I remember we had to dig our way out of the house. So it's so great for me, this is when comics are just completely engaging and they have my full attention. There's an unusual, maybe not unusual in this case, but you got a decent story. You've got some really unique art. You've got some fantastic editorials. You've got some really good letters pages. I just really feel like this 5 issues has such a snapshot of a time period for me as I read through it. I don't think I've ever experienced anything like it. There's been parts like Ms. Tree, for example. The letters page in the Ms. Tree comic are infamous, and there's some really great stuff in there. But this one seems to have a little bit of everything. So I'm a fan of this. I dig this. I'm really glad that I took a chance and picked up those first 2 issues and then finally sat down to actually read them, as hard as issue 2 was to get through. Issue 5, it kind of ended on that note too. This issue 5, a lot of great stuff happens, but it still had its moments. It felt like they got a little dense again in issue number 5. So really amazing. So recommended. And like I said, if you do find the graphic novels, in the graphic novels, there's 2 volumes of them. In the second volume, they also print that 6th issue as well is in there. So the best part of those black and white boom comics are often the delusional but endearing editorials. Yeah, all the lofty ambitions that never materialize. Totally. And I mean, you feel for them, right? Like, they were really trying something and they were really gaining some headway to some degree. I think it just kind of, shit just went wrong, man, but I applaud them for giving it a go. Yeah. Okay. So we have to talk about this, right? No, we don't have to talk about that one. We have to talk about this one. We have to. Man. And again, it feels, it's so great when this shit happens. So the other thing that I talked about picking up was I found a copy of the Young Master issue number 1 and Young Master issue number 9. So it was a 9-issue series. There was a one-shot with a. Now it's a bit confusing because the one-shot is the Young Master and it looks like the subtitle of it is the Demon Blade. But then there's another issue that's just called the Demon Blade. So I'm assuming it's all kind of in the same camp. I loved those 2 issues of Master. I love this even more. This first issue of Young Master is just phenomenal. So I reached out to one of the guys, Greg Harder, who I bought from before in town. Someone reminded me of his alternative comics list, and I had a look, and he has most of the rest of these comics. So I have an email out to him to try to get my hands on them. So we get introduced to the Young Master and his father, who are kind of training, working the land, just living, but also training. And we find out his origins. And his origins, you and I, my son, we're like the great Lord's finest swords, hidden away in a safe place until we are needed again. It is our duty to keep ourselves well honed, free of rust and ready to fly from our scabbards to cut down the enemies of our Lord. And if our honor stands in the way of our duty, our only honor is our only honor is in our duty. We have no family name, no tangled political ties, nothing. We are the remorseless killing machines of the great Lord, and our loyalty is unquestionable. That is our honor. It's just filled with these fucking badass moments like that. So his father's brothers come to visit to help him train in different ways. And I don't want to spoil anything, but he finally gets his hands on a mission and is kind of sent on his path. And I am so in love with this book. I can't even describe how much. We get a little section, we get a little interlude, just a little bit of prose, so not too much, just those pages. Later. Thank you very much, Phone Pals. Thanks for hanging out. When he kind of reaches the next step of his kind of mission, they get kind of ambushed by some ninjas, and in this one panel here, the first two assassins were journeymen. They died like cattle as he hacks one in the tummy and cuts the arm off the other one. It's fucking badass, man. This is a great book. And this art is phenomenal. I love everything about this. This is going to be another one that if there's a graphic novel, if this ever got collected, I'm picking that up once I get my hands on the other issues as well. And like I said, I'm hoping this weekend I'll be able to get my hands on more of these. As much as I want to jump ahead and read number 9, I'm not lopping off heads. So good. So good. Yeah, it's another one that comes with the highest recommendation. If you see this in the dollar bins, if you see this in the 25-cent bins, hell, I'd even say if you see this in the $2 bins, pick it up. Yes, that's right. You should spend a whole $2 on this book. I really, truly mean that. And honestly, as much as I love The Master, I would say this one, just go with this one first. New Comics Group is the company. And I don't remember if, so it's Larry Hama and Val Merrick. November, what year was it? Let's open it up again and double check, because now I'm not sure. Yeah, 1987. So we're looking at 1987 for this one. The highest of Comic Crack recommendations on this one, man. Check it out. The third issue of Dracula, Vlad the Impaler, was just as good as the first two. I love the way this story kind of moved along. I love that it kind of ended us. Oh, you also get a little insert where you can win Topps comics and cards and stuff like that. So it gets us all the way to the moment where he kind of fully becomes Dracula and comes back to life and feeds on people and realizes what his fate is. So it's just a really nicely told story. And again, just some really badass art. And then this one had the cards as well too. I found this one polybagged. So not only do we get the cards, oops, on the back, there was only 9 cards, so 3 cards with each of the 3 issues. And on the back, we get pieces to a puzzle. I looked online just to see if anybody was selling just the cards. And of course, there's quite a few people selling just the cards. I think there was also an uncut sheet too. But when I was looking through the alternative comics list from Greg, he had the first 2 polybagged with the cards. So I'm going to see, I sent it, like I said, sent him an email. I'm going to see if he still has those. And if so, I'm going to grab those so I can get the entire 9 card set. I think he was selling each of the books for $2 a pop, I believe, something like that. So we'll see when he gets back to me what he still has in stock. The list that I was looking off of was a little old, so I don't know if how up to date it is. Aragone's Boogeyman, which is his kind of little one-man horror anthology, which I was unsure of, honestly. As much as I love Aragones, and I think his art is incredible, I wasn't quite sure how this was going to play out, if it was going to be an absolute joke from beginning to end. But honestly, he really mixes it up very, very well. So using this premise of the boogeyman that you were told about when you were a kid, how as you get older, or even when you're a kid, rather, that boogeyman manifests itself in different ways. Anything that you're scared of, you turn into the boogeyman. So it has the first story that we get after our introduction is called The Dictator, and just kind of following this kid who's told these stories of being boogeymans that he's afraid of his entire life, so much so that he becomes the dictator of a country and turns into the boogeyman himself. Fantastic. So a fairly serious and heavy message in it. But then the second story, we get kind of classic Aragones, some funny stuff. The old mortician, someone's died. They're getting kind of prepared. They come in to see him and go, no, what have you done? His lips are supposed to be blue. His eyes are supposed to be red. When he finally does it, he realizes that in real life, he was a clown. So now he looks exactly like they remember him as. So another one that was a surprise. I wasn't aware of this one. David McKenzie, thanks very much for coming. Liking your channel, found you through Jared Osborne, Howler Mouse, Cavern of Chaos. Amazing. Watching one of your older videos. I appreciate your Jesse Jacobs recommendations. Oh man, I love to hear that. Thank you very much for saying that. I really appreciate that. I love when people stumble on the channel and find some stuff in the back catalog, which is, 8 years deep at this point. I really appreciate that. I'm glad that you've discovered, or I could help you discover Jesse Jacobs. It's one of the things that I've said many times about this channel, that I love to focus on all of this different kind of stuff just for exactly that reason. If somebody may just stumble onto it some way, somehow. So thank you very much for hanging out, David. And then finally, completely different from anything else we've talked about, I was talking a little while ago about randomly picking up one of these Action Comics weekly, because in it, there's a Dead Man story, there's a Secret Six story, there's a Black Hawk story, there's a Wild Dog story. And previously, pardon me, I didn't mention the Black Hawk story because I don't know if it stood out to me like it did in this one. So it's Mike Grell as the writer, Rick Burchett as penciler, Pablo Marcus as inker, and Rick Burchett did some stuff with Batman Animated. Man, look at that shit. It's kind of a cross between Chaykin and Trina Robbins. It has a little bit of Trina Robbins flavor in there, but those faces are, especially of that guy there, that's such a Chaykin kind of face. But it's this really kind of clean style. It's great, man. So like I was saying, when I picked up that other one, this wouldn't be something that I would go to. This isn't something that I would have really hunted out, because I just honestly wouldn't have thought that it would have appealed to me. But on picking up that previous issue, it's a lot of fun to read these stories in this way. You just get these little bite-sized stories that continue through a number of issues. And I love it. The main draw, and I also love it when the main draw for me becomes not the thing that I'm least interested in, because the Dead Man story in here is fantastic, but it isn't the highlight. I would say that Black Hawk is the highlight. So here we have Wild Dog. But yeah, I'm going to be hunting for more of these. Even the Green Lantern story wasn't horrible. It wasn't my favorite. I enjoyed the art in this one as well too, but I don't know. I mean, maybe I just haven't read the right Green Lantern story yet, because it didn't really hold my interest too much. So I kind of ended up skimming through that. But here's Dead Man Goes to Hell. This is chapter 5. So he's been captured, and they're going to do some experiments on him, and he ends up escaping and finds another spirit. So as he takes over someone's body, he feels the energy of another possible dead man spirit in this vase, and the vase is trying to convince him to free him, which of course he says no. So what happens? He gets drawn in and told, well, if you're not going to let me out, I'll bring you in, and you can spend eternity with me here in hell. So yeah, really great. Something a little more mainstream that I wouldn't normally gravitate to, but as much as it's good to take a chance on the indie stuff, it's also good to take a chance on some of the mainstream stuff. So that's kind of what I've been reading this week so far. I don't remember what I'm up to in my 500 comic goal, but I've put quite a dent in that. Actually, I'll put those over there because that's all going to fall down. So thanks very much, everybody, for hanging out. Architectural Foam Panels and Columns, thank you very much. David McKenzie, thanks again. Like I said, in the description, there's a couple of links. One of them is to a WeTransfer, where you can download my latest radio show called Dead Air that plays every Tuesday night on UMFM 101.5, the university station here in town. That link will be live and active for a week or two. I can't remember how long those WeTransfer links work. But if you want to hear a repeat of an episode from last year, download that, listen to some music, read some comics. And then in the link is Mina Mazzini, highly recommended. Gore Vidal, I sent Gore Vidal a link to Mina Mazzini a couple of weeks ago now, because I thought it might be in his wheelhouse of things he would enjoy, and I would encourage all of you to give it a shot. So thank you very much, everybody, and we'll talk to you.